Under a slate-gray sky, the rain had just begun to drizzle, cold and uninvited, tapping against the windshield of Nathan Hale's Land Rover as he navigated the winding road out of Florence, Vermont. It was supposed to be a brief detour, an escape from yet another suffocating business meeting and a break from the incessant expectations of his family. But in the next half hour, Nathan would make a decision that would rewrite the story of his life. Not in boardrooms or spreadsheets, but on cracked concrete under flickering gas station lights, with a girl who had nothing left but a broken past, a stubborn heart, and a dog who wouldn't leave her side. He hadn't meant to stop. The gaslight blinked on, forcing his hand. He turned into the only station for miles, a rundown relic from the 80s with a single functioning pump and a convenience store that smelled of bleach and burnt coffee. The wind howled through the thin gaps in the siding, and Nathan tightened the collar of his coat as he stepped out. That's when he heard it. "Give her back." The voice, sharp, defiant, pierced through the steady rhythm of the rain. Around the corner of the building, he caught the movement. 3 teenage boys, tall and laughing, circling a girl no older than 20. She was slight, soaked through, her clothes clinging to her like they might slip off with the wrong breath. In her arms, she held a shaking dog, fur matted and eyes wide. Nathan didn't stop to think. He rounded the corner, his footsteps deliberate, purposeful. The tallest boy, emboldened, took a step toward the girl. "It's just a stray, you freak." "It's mine," she said, voice steel. "She chose me." The boy reached forward. That's when Nathan's voice cut through the air. "That's enough." All 3 turned. Nathan wasn't holding a weapon. He didn't raise his voice, but his presence, the way he carried himself, the sharp line of his jaw, the calm authority in his eyes, was enough to make them freeze. "Go," he said simply. The boys shuffled, muttered, but within seconds they were gone. The girl didn't thank him, not right away. Her focus remained on the dog, stroking its head, murmuring something under her breath. Only when she was sure the danger had passed did she look up at him. "Thanks," she said finally, "but I had it." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Clearly." She stood slowly, cradling the dog like a child. "She's Scout. Found her 2 weeks ago outside a convenience store in Harrisburg. She's been following me ever since." "You have a place to go?" She tilted her head, eyes narrowing. "Do I look like I have a place to go?" Nathan didn't answer. Her tone wasn't bitter, just tired. Honest. "You hungry?" he asked instead. She hesitated. "I'm not offering charity," he added. "I just don't like eating alone." After a long pause, she nodded. They sat on a bench outside, sharing 2 gas station hot dogs and cups of instant coffee. She told him her name was Clara, 21, dropped out of community college. Her mother had pushed her into accounting, said art was for dreamers. Then came Denny, the mechanic her mom married, the one who stared too long and brushed against her in the hallway. When Clara spoke up, her mother chose him. So she left. No plan. Just a bag, a little cash from a summer job, and the clothes on her back. She didn't cry, didn't embellish. Just said it like it was another fact, like the weather or the date. Nathan listened, but something inside him tightened. He knew pain in people. He'd grown up watching his mother push through hardship, and his father, gritty and loyal, hold a household together on a bus driver's wage. But this girl's pain had a different shape. It was quiet, deep, still smoldering. When they finished, Clara wiped her hands on her jeans and stood. "I should get moving. Scout and I try to find shelter before dark." Nathan looked at her, really looked. She was shivering but proud, wary but not afraid. There was no act, no manipulation. Just a girl who had run out of places to run. "You said you were good at cleaning, cooking?" She frowned. "Where's this going?" "I've got a guest house, empty, needs care, and I could use help around the property. It's outside Boston, quiet, safe, no strings." Clara laughed once, dry and skeptical. "You offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a choice." She looked down at Scout, who sat patiently, tail wagging. The dog seemed to trust him already. And that was how, 30 minutes after a gas station hot dog and an interrupted assault, Clara climbed into the passenger seat of Nathan Hale's SUV. They drove in silence for miles, through fading daylight past sleepy towns and forests that blurred into dark. Every now and then, Clara glanced sideways. He didn't try to talk, didn't stare, just drove, steady and calm. "Why are you doing this?" she asked finally. Nathan didn't look at her. "Because someone should have done it for my mom once." She didn't ask anything else. By the time they reached the gates to his estate, it was well past midnight. Clara blinked at the house that emerged through the trees. Elegant but not ostentatious, surrounded by pines and silence. The guest house was warm, well-stocked, with fresh sheets and a heater that hummed softly. Nathan gave her a phone. "For work, but you can use it for personal things, too." Clara stared at the device like it might burn her. I haven't had one in a while." "You don't have to explain." She whispered a thank you, barely audible, and then closed the door behind him. Nathan returned to the main house and stood at the window for a long time, watching the light in her cottage flicker on. Something about the whole thing felt unreal, but not wrong, not at all. And that's how it began. A man with more money than peace, a girl with nothing but grit, and a dog who never stopped believing. If you're still watching, you're probably wondering the same thing I did when I first heard this story. Would you have done what Nathan did? Invited a total stranger into your home based on instinct alone? If you think his choice was foolish, comment A, never. Too risky. If you believe some people deserve a leap of faith, comment B, yes. Sometimes it's worth it. Drop your answer in the comments. We read every single one. And if you want to hear what happened next, how the single moment spiraled into a story no one saw coming, then don't forget to subscribe. Supporting this channel means we get to bring you more real, gripping, emotional stories like this one. And trust me, you won't want to miss the ending to Clara and Nathan's journey. Now, let's continue, because this wasn't just a chance encounter. This was the beginning of everything. The first morning Clara woke up in the guest house. The room was bathed in golden light seeping through the curtains, and for a brief, disoriented moment she thought she'd dreamt everything. The warmth, the silence, the scent of pine and wood polish. Then Scout leapt onto the bed with a grunt and a nudge, and Clara blinked against the sunlight, realizing this was real. She was not curled up in a bus station or tucked between crates in the back of an abandoned shed. She was in a real bed, with real sheets, and someone had trusted her enough to give her keys and a roof. Still, the weight in her chest hadn't lifted. The burden of being an outsider, of owing something, of waiting for the moment Nathan might regret his decision, it lingered. The first few days passed cautiously. Clara moved through the main house like a whisper, always waiting until she was sure Nathan was gone before cleaning the rooms he used. She folded laundry with military precision, scrubbed counters until her hands cracked, and left detailed lists of supplies she noticed were low. She wasn't trying to impress him. She was trying to prove, to herself most of all, that she belonged. Nathan barely said much at first. He left notes on the kitchen counter. "Thank you for organizing the pantry. The guest towels look great." Short, to the point. But there was something kind in the brevity, as if he knew she needed time and space to find her footing. On the fourth evening, he came back early, his usual late-night schedule interrupted by a canceled meeting. Clara had just finished mopping the mudroom floor and froze when the front door opened. Nathan glanced at her boots near the bench and called out softly, "Clara? You're still here?" She stepped into the hallway, wiping her hands on her apron. "I was just finishing up." Nathan tilted his head. "You don't have to clean like you're trying to pay rent with elbow grease?" Clara looked away. "It's how I stay grounded." He didn't press. Instead, he walked past her, paused, then looked back. "Have you eaten?" She hesitated. "No." "Good. I was going to make grilled cheese. Want to join me?" She nearly laughed. "Grilled cheese?" "Don't judge. It's my one culinary skill." That night, over slightly burnt sandwiches and mugs of tomato soup, something shifted. They sat at the long oak kitchen table, the silence no longer heavy but companionable. Nathan asked her what kind of art she liked. She said she used to draw animals, people, moments that made her feel safe. He told her about growing up in a small town with nothing but ambition, and how he'd built his company by being the guy who never left the office. Clara watched his face as he spoke, noticing the creases near his eyes when he smiled, the way he flexed his fingers absent-mindedly when thinking. He was used to solving problems, organizing chaos. She wondered what it must be like to live in control all the time. Later, in her cottage, Clara pulled out her sketchbook. She hadn't touched it in months, but something about the night compelled her to draw. Not a landscape or a memory, but Nathan. The way he looked when he told her he was terrible at cooking, his expression caught between pride and embarrassment. She sketched quietly for hours until Scout's snore startled her into sleep. Over the next 2 weeks, they fell into a rhythm. Nathan left early most mornings, coffee in hand, already on the phone with clients or vendors. Clara tidied the house, made light meals, and took Scout for long walks through the pine trails behind the property. She discovered a small clearing where sunlight filtered like stained glass and began bringing her sketch pad there every afternoon. Nathan started noticing things. The way the rooms had more light, more air. The scent of fresh-baked bread that lingered in the halls. One evening he found the kitchen chalkboard updated with a funny quote in Clara's handwriting. "I don't rise and shine. I caffeinate and hope for the best." He chuckled aloud. Then one night he noticed something else. He had dropped by the guest house to leave her an envelope with some cash, payment for the past weeks, and saw the door slightly ajar. He knocked once, then gently pushed it open. Clara wasn't there. But on the table sat a sketchbook open. He shouldn't have looked. He knew that. But the drawing caught his eye. It was Scout, curled in her usual crescent moon shape, fast asleep. The detail was exquisite, lifelike, tender. Every stroke breathed love. He flipped the page. Another drawing, this one of his kitchen, the counter cluttered with bread, butter, and 2 mugs, as though Clara had captured that grilled cheese night with reverence. Then another. A portrait of him. Not formal, but caught mid-thought, leaning over the table, chin resting on his palm. Nathan felt something stir deep in his chest, an ache, but not a painful one. A memory, maybe. A longing. He closed the book carefully and stepped outside just as Clara was returning, her cheeks pink from the cold. He handed her the envelope and said gently, "You're talented." She froze. "You saw my sketches?" "I only looked because the wind opened your door. I'm sorry." Clara swallowed. "They're just how I keep from disappearing." He held her gaze. "They're remarkable." She didn't know how to respond, so she simply nodded and said, "Thank you." It became a quiet understanding between them. He didn't ask to see more. She didn't offer. But every time he caught her humming in the kitchen or saw Scout curled beside her like a guardian, the space between them narrowed. Clara started exploring more than the house. She began venturing into the city, using the subway card Nathan had left on the counter. She visited libraries, sketched passers-by, and once even stood outside an art gallery for a full hour, too nervous to go in. She returned that night and drew it from memory. Still, the doubt lingered. Who was she to live here? To pretend she was more than a burden Nathan hadn't figured out how to send away. One rainy afternoon, Nathan found her pacing the back porch. "You okay?" he asked. Clara shook her head. "I don't know how long this lasts. When you'll wake up and realize I don't belong." Nathan stepped closer. "Clara, I don't do things out of guilt. If I didn't want you here, you wouldn't be." She bit her lip. "That's just it. I don't want to feel like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop." Nathan looked at her, really looked, and said, "Then stop waiting. This isn't charity. This is choice. Mine. Yours." Later that week, she hung a new drawing above the mantel in the guest house. It was the clearing in the woods, sun streaming through the trees, and in the center, a silhouette of a girl and a dog, finally still. Clara still didn't know what this was, what it might become, but she was starting to believe in it. Slowly, tentatively. And Nathan? He had no idea that this girl, quiet, stubborn, guarded, was about to change his life in ways he had never anticipated. Their paths had crossed by chance, but what was beginning to form between them was anything but accidental. Nathan stood in the kitchen, staring at the 2 mugs of coffee he had just poured. His mother's voice still echoed in his ears from the phone call earlier that morning, filled with a carefully measured blend of warmth and concern, hope and disappointment. She and his father were planning to visit Boston next week. It wasn't a surprise. Marianne had hinted at it for months. What made it different now was the tone in her voice, the unmistakable implication behind her words. They were coming not just to see their only son, but to finally meet the woman they believed he was building a life with. The woman he had never actually introduced. Because, of course, she didn't exist. Not yet. He took a deep breath and walked across the driveway to the guest house. Clara opened the door before he could knock. She wore her usual gray cardigan and jeans, her hair pulled up in a messy bun, a pencil still tucked behind her ear. Scout barked once in greeting before returning to her spot by the fireplace. Nathan stepped inside, holding the coffee out to her like a peace offering. "I need to ask you something, and you can say no." Clara raised an eyebrow and took the mug, gesturing for him to sit. That's usually how unsettling conversations begin. Nathan sat across from her, rubbing his hands together slowly. "My parents are coming to visit next week. My dad's been struggling with some health issues, nothing immediately life-threatening, but serious enough that they're starting to talk about legacy, about family." He paused, uncertain, choosing his next words carefully. "They think I'm seeing someone, that I've finally found someone worth building a future with. And I told them I was engaged." Clara blinked once. "Engaged?" Nathan nodded, not meeting her eyes. "It was stupid, I know. I didn't mean for the lie to go on this long. But my mother, she's been worried. And I thought if I could give them a little peace just for once, it might help." Clara leaned back slowly, processing. "So let me get this straight. You want me to pretend to be your fiancé? For your parents?" "For a week. Yes," he said softly. "I know it's a lot to ask, and I wouldn't blame you if you laughed me out of the room. But I thought, maybe, if you'd consider it." Clara studied him, her gaze steady, her voice quiet. "Do you even know what you're asking?" He met her eyes finally. "I think so. But I'd rather be honest about it than leave you guessing." There was a long silence between them, filled only by the low hum of the heater and Scout's soft breathing. Clara looked down at the coffee in her hands, then back up at him. "I've been invisible most of my life," she said. "Even when I lived at home, it was like I didn't exist. I was useful, but I wasn't seen. Now you want me to step into a role where everything I am will be observed and measured by people who raised you." Nathan's expression tightened. "Yes, and that's why I came to you first. Not because I think you can fake it, but because I believe you're strong enough to handle it." Clara didn't answer right away. She stood and walked to the small shelf where her sketchbook lay closed. Her fingers lingered on the edge of the pages as if weighing the weight of the decision she was about to make. "I'll do it," she said finally, "but only if we do it right. No half-truths. If I'm going to pretend to be your fiancé, I need to know everything about you. Your habits, your stories, what your mother likes, what your father doesn't. If we're going to pull this off, it has to feel real." Nathan exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Deal?" The next few days were consumed by preparation. Clara moved temporarily into the main house, not because Nathan asked her to, but because it made the story easier to believe. She brought Scout, of course, and Nathan set up a small bed for the dog near the fireplace. They reviewed every detail of their fictional engagement. How they met, an art exhibition Nathan had sponsored. Their first date, coffee followed by a walk through the common. And how Nathan proposed, a quiet moment on the back porch under the stars. At first it was awkward. Clara stumbled over memories that weren't hers, and Nathan corrected her gently. But over time they began to build a rhythm. Small inside jokes, shared glances, and even nicknames that emerged naturally through repetition. One afternoon, while they were walking through the garden rehearsing responses to questions they might face, Nathan turned to her suddenly. "You're not just good at this," he said. "You're believable." Clara looked away, pretending to examine a budding rose bush. "That's because I'm used to pretending." Nathan stopped walking. "Clara?" She shook her head. "It's fine. I know the difference between real and pretend. This is just a role. I can handle that." He wanted to say more, but he didn't. Not yet. The day his parents arrived was bright and cold, the kind of deceptive spring day that hinted at warmth but delivered none. Clara wore a soft blue sweater and a silver pendant necklace Nathan had suggested as a finishing touch. She looked calm, elegant, nothing like the girl he'd met weeks ago at that gas station. Marianne stepped out of the car first. She was as sharp-eyed and dignified as ever, her gray coat impeccably tailored, her posture perfect. Richard followed, smiling despite his evident fatigue. Nathan approached them, arms open. "Mom, Dad, this is Clara." Clara stepped forward, her smile warm but not overdone. She extended her hand, and Marianne took it after a moment's pause. "I've heard so much about you," Clara said. Marianne studied her for a beat, then smiled. "And yet, we've heard almost nothing about you." They laughed, the tension easing slightly. Richard hugged her like he'd known her for years. That night, they went to dinner at a restaurant Nathan had reserved in Beacon Hill. The candlelight flickered across white linens, and Clara sat beside Nathan, her hand brushing his just enough to suggest intimacy. Over wine, Clara told a story about their trip to the coast, a fabricated memory Nathan had come up with, but the way she told it, down to the sea breeze and the awkward sunburn Nathan had gotten, made it feel real. Marianne watched them carefully, but Clara held her ground. When they returned home and the guests had retired to their rooms, Clara stood on the back porch, breathing in the cool night air. Nathan joined her, wrapping his coat around his shoulders. "You were perfect tonight." She looked at him, a hint of sadness behind her eyes. "Yeah, but that's the thing about perfect. It's usually practiced." Nathan didn't answer. He just stood beside her, close enough to feel the truth between them, and somewhere in the quiet he realized this wasn't just pretend anymore. Not for him. Maybe not for her either, but neither of them was ready to say it out loud. Not yet. Clara hadn't expected it to feel so easy. She had spent days preparing herself for discomfort, for awkward silences, for critical glances from Nathan's parents. But now, 3 days into their visit, she found herself navigating the role of fiancée with unexpected ease, slipping into routines that began to feel dangerously natural. Mornings started with coffee in the sunlit kitchen, Marianne praising the fresh pastries Clara had prepared, Richard asking for another story about the art shows Clara supposedly attended in New York. She knew it was a performance, but there were moments, glances from Nathan, a gentle touch on her back, a spontaneous laugh shared over the kitchen sink, when it stopped feeling like acting. Marianne had started warming to her, not all at once, but in subtle ways. She asked Clara to join her on walks through the garden, and on the second day she even offered her an old family cookbook, claiming it had helped her learn to speak love through food. Clara took the gift carefully, unsure if it was sincere or a test, but either way, she accepted it with gratitude. Richard, in contrast, needed no convincing. He adored Clara from the start, often teasing Nathan for finally choosing someone smarter than himself. His warmth was effortless, and Clara found herself drawn to his gentleness, the way he looked at his son with silent pride. Still, behind the comfort, Clara felt something dangerous stirring beneath the surface, an awareness that this was all supposed to be temporary, and yet nothing about it felt false anymore. She watched Nathan when he didn't realize she was looking, the way he paused before speaking to his mother, the softness in his eyes when he saw her curled up on the porch reading, the way he lingered just a little longer than needed when he passed her a cup of tea. These weren't gestures of obligation. They were choices, and that frightened her more than she wanted to admit. One evening, as the wind picked up and scattered pink petals across the lawn, Clara sat with Marianne in the conservatory, sipping tea while Scout slept curled at their feet. The glass ceiling let in the last golden rays of light, casting a warm glow over everything. Marianne glanced over at Clara with a look that made her heart pause. "You know," she said, setting down her cup, "I was skeptical at first. Nathan doesn't talk much about his life. He rarely lets anyone in. I suppose that's partly my fault." Clara looked at her, unsure if she was meant to respond. Marianne continued, her tone softer now. "He's had relationships before, brief ones. Always smart, well-dressed women with strong opinions. But with you, it's different. He's different." Clara held her breath, uncertain how to navigate what was clearly a very thin line between truth and illusion. "I used to think he was hiding from something," Marianne said. "Now I think maybe he was just waiting." Clara placed her cup down, her fingers trembling slightly. "Mrs. Hale, call me Marianne. Marianne, I just want to say that I never expected any of this. Nathan has been generous, kind, and I'm grateful to be here, truly." Marianne studied her with a knowing look. "You don't have to convince me, Clara. I see the way you look at him." Clara froze. It's not the look of someone playing a part. Later that night, Clara lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her thoughts spinning. She had never wanted to deceive anyone. But wasn't that exactly what she was doing? And worse, wasn't she starting to believe in the lie herself? The next day, Nathan had an early meeting at one of his warehouses, so Clara stayed behind with the Hales. After lunch, while Richard napped and Marianne was occupied with a phone call, Clara took Scout for a walk through the trails behind the estate. The sun was bright, the air crisp, and for a while she let herself believe this was her life, that she lived here, that she belonged. As they returned, Clara heard the crunch of tires on gravel and looked up to see a sleek black car pull into the driveway. A tall woman with dark hair and red nails stepped out, dressed in designer heels that looked wildly out of place on the cobblestone. Clara's heart sank. She didn't know who the woman was, but something about her posture, the way she scanned the house, made Clara instinctively step back. Nathan's voice rang out a second later. He had returned unexpectedly and was striding toward the woman. "Vanessa," he said tightly. Clara stopped moving. "Vanessa. So this was her, the ex. What are you doing here?" Nathan asked. Vanessa shrugged, unbothered by his tone. "I was in town. Thought I'd say hi. I saw your parents' car. Figured it might be a good time." Nathan looked over his shoulder and spotted Clara in the distance. His eyes widened slightly, but he didn't call out to her. "I don't think now is the time," he said firmly. Vanessa tilted her head. "Is she the reason? The one you're pretending not to care about?" Nathan stepped closer. "Leave, Vanessa." Clara didn't hear what came next. She turned and walked away, her chest tight, her ears burning. She didn't want to listen to another man's complicated history. She didn't want to feel replaced before she'd ever really belonged. That night, she avoided him. She went through the motions, helping Marianne prepare dinner, listening to Richard's stories, laughing at the right moments, but inside she was unraveling. Later, when everyone had gone to bed, she sat on the porch with Scout curled at her feet, her sketchbook open in her lap. She didn't draw. She just stared at the page, blank and accusing. The door creaked open behind her. "Clara?" She didn't turn. "I didn't expect her," Nathan said. "She just showed up." Clara still said nothing. "I told her to leave." She seemed like someone who wasn't used to being told no. Nathan sat beside her, not too close. "You're right. She hated being out of control." Clara finally turned. "So, what was I? The opposite of her? You're not anyone's opposite. You're yourself." Clara looked down at the empty page. This was supposed to be pretend. Nathan nodded slowly. "I know. It doesn't feel like it anymore." He reached out, gently taking the sketchbook from her lap. "Then maybe we stop pretending." Clara didn't answer, but she let him stay beside her a little longer, and when he finally stood to leave, she whispered, "Good night," with a softness that held more than just politeness. After he left, Clara opened her sketchbook and began to draw. Not him, not Scout, not the garden. She drew herself standing at the edge of something vast and beautiful and terrifying, and for the first time she didn't feel like a stranger in her own story. The rain came softly that morning, blurring the edges of the windows with mist. Clara stood in the kitchen, the sleeves of her cardigan rolled up to her elbows, her hands dusted in flour as she shaped dough for cinnamon rolls. The house was quiet. Nathan had left early to inspect a site, and Marianne and Richard had gone into town for a mid-morning art tour. The silence felt heavier than usual, not oppressive, but expectant, like something was shifting beneath the surface of everything she had come to know here. Scout stirred near the fireplace, letting out a low, contented sigh. Clara looked over at her companion and smiled. She had come so far from the girl who wandered into Nathan Hale's life with nothing but a backpack and a tired dog. There were days she barely recognized herself. Not in the mirror, she still saw the same worn eyes, the same unsure hands, but in her spirit. Something was beginning to bloom, and that was the part she didn't know what to do with. She hadn't planned to show anyone the drawings. They were private, just hers, sketches she'd made when the weight of her thoughts grew too heavy to speak aloud. But after that night on the porch, when Nathan had admitted he no longer wanted to pretend, she hadn't stopped thinking about it, about how much of her truth she had buried to protect herself, about the possibility that, just maybe, someone had finally earned the right to see it. When Nathan returned that afternoon, soaked from the drizzle, she met him at the door, towel in hand. He grinned sheepishly and wiped the water from his face. "You make the best coffee," he said, accepting the steaming mug she handed him. "And you have terrible luck with umbrellas," she replied, her tone soft, teasing. They settled in the living room, the fireplace crackling, the rain a steady rhythm against the glass. For a while, they said nothing, just existing in the same space, no longer needing to fill every silence with conversation. Then Clara stood and crossed the room. She returned with her sketchbook, holding it with both hands like it was a sacred object. "I want to show you something," she said quietly. Nathan looked up, surprised but curious. She handed him the book and sat beside him, suddenly nervous. He flipped open the first page and stared. It was a pencil portrait of Scout, captured mid-snooze, the folds of her ears perfectly shaded, her expression tranquil. He turned the page. There was the kitchen table, lit with late afternoon light, his hand reaching for a coffee mug, Clara's arm just visible beside him. Another page showed a candid rendering of his parents sitting on the porch, Marianne's laugh caught in a delicate tilt of her head, Richard's gentle amusement soft in his expression. And then there was him. Not posed, not aware, just seen. Clara had drawn him as he looked when he was focused, a little tired, a little thoughtful. The weight of responsibility was etched into his features, but there was a softness there too, something vulnerable, something almost hopeful. He turned to her slowly. "These are incredible," he said. She shook her head. "They're just sketches." "No," he said, still looking at the book. "They're more than that. They're honest. You see people in ways they don't even see themselves." Claire exhaled shakily. "That's how I survived. When I couldn't say things out loud, I drew them. Feelings, people, places I missed. Sometimes I think I've drawn every version of myself just to figure out who I really am." Nathan closed the book gently and set it on the coffee table. "I think I'm just starting to understand who you are, and I don't want to stop learning." The words hung between them, heavier than anything else he had ever said to her. She didn't respond with words, just rested her head on his shoulder, and they sat like that until the fire burned down to embers. The following week passed in a quiet rhythm, but something unspoken lingered between them. They were closer now, more comfortable, more intimate in the way they moved through each other's spaces. Yet Clara still hesitated to fully believe in it. Nathan had a life built from steel and certainty, while she still felt like a shadow at the edge of her own existence. One afternoon, Dustin dropped by with a friend, an older woman named Elise, who ran a local gallery and owed Dustin a favor for helping her through a digital marketing mess last year. Nathan had casually mentioned Clara's art, and Dustin, ever perceptive, had taken it upon himself to arrange an introduction. Clara was mortified at first, resisting the idea of showing her work to a stranger, but Elise was gentle, respectful, and surprisingly impressed. She spent nearly an hour flipping through the sketchbook, nodding, sometimes smiling, and then offering words Clara had never heard from someone in the professional world. "You have a gift," Elise said. "This kind of emotional clarity is rare. Have you considered formal training?" Clara blinked. "I studied accounting," she muttered. Briefly. Elise chuckled. "That's one way to pay the bills. But this could be a way to build a life, if you want it." After Elise left, Clara sat at the kitchen table staring at her hands. Nathan came in and placed a warm mug of tea in front of her. "I didn't mean to push you," he said. "You didn't," she replied. "I think I'm just scared of wanting something, really wanting it." Nathan sat beside her. "You're allowed to want things, Clara. Dreams don't make you fragile, they make you real." Later that night, she called Jennifer, her old friend, someone she hadn't spoken to in months. They talked for nearly an hour, laughter and tears spilling across the line. Jennifer was thrilled to hear from her and even more surprised to learn where she was and what she was doing. "Is he good to you?" Jennifer asked. Clara thought for a long time before answering. "Yes. And it's not just that. I think he sees me. Really sees me." Jennifer's voice softened. "Then don't let that go, Clara. Not everyone gets that kind of chance." Days passed, and Clara began making plans to enroll in part-time art classes. She explored options at a small college nearby, researched scholarships, and even visited the campus once with Nathan. They stood in the Student Art Center, surrounded by canvases and sculpture, and she realized for the first time that a future she had long stopped believing in might still be possible. One evening, as the weather began to warm and spring hinted at its return, Clara walked into the main house and found Nathan asleep on the couch, a book resting on his chest. She stood there for a long time, watching him. There was a peacefulness in his expression she rarely saw. A softness. She reached for her sketchbook. She drew him again, not just as a man resting, but as a symbol of safety, of what it felt like to be cared for without condition, to be chosen, not pitied, to be home. When she finished, she tucked the sketch between the pages of the book and closed it gently. In that moment, she knew something was changing inside her. This wasn't just a chapter in her life. It was the beginning of the rest of her story. The first days of April arrived with a fragile kind of beauty. In Boston, the last of the snow had melted into the earth, and the trees lining the winding road to Nathan's estate began to blush with buds and early blooms. Clara stood at the edge of the garden one morning, her fingers resting on the sketchbook tucked under her arm. The air smelled of wet soil and distant blossoms, and it made her feel unexpectedly like she was standing on the brink of something vast and tender. Nathan had just left for a brief business trip, 2 days in Chicago to finalize a distribution contract. It was the first time in weeks he had left without her, and though Clara knew she could handle the solitude, she also knew she would miss the steady rhythm of his presence. Their routine had become a quiet tether, shared breakfasts, late-night walks with Scout, and unspoken reassurances that neither of them was alone anymore. With Nathan gone, Clara allowed herself space to reflect, to breathe without being observed. She spent the morning cleaning the guest house and rearranging her art supplies. Then she pulled out her sketchbook and opened it to a fresh page. She didn't start drawing right away. Instead, she sat for a long while staring at the blank paper, thinking about how far she'd come since that first night at the gas station. She had intended to stay only until she could figure things out. A few weeks, maybe a month. But now, half a year had passed. She had a job, a home, friends, even, possibly, a future. And somewhere in the folds of all that unexpected grace, she had fallen in love with a man who saw her for everything she was and everything she feared she couldn't be. Still, something inside her hesitated. It wasn't fear of Nathan or of the life she was slowly building. It was fear of herself, of not knowing how to be loved without looking for the exit. That afternoon, while organizing Nathan's mail, Clara came across an envelope addressed to her. The handwriting was familiar, slanted, sharp, and unmistakably her mother's. Clara stared at it for several seconds before carefully tearing it open. The letter inside was brief. Clara, Jennifer stopped by the house. Said she heard from you, said you were doing well. I don't know what happened between us. Maybe I wasn't fair to you. Maybe I missed the signs. I don't know how to fix things, but I thought you should know. I'm glad you're safe. I hope you're happy. Mom Clara folded the letter slowly and held it against her chest. It wasn't an apology, not exactly, but it was something, a reaching out. And in its own way, it meant more than she expected. That night, Nathan called from his hotel. His voice, low and tired, filled her kitchen like a memory made real. "How's Scout?" he asked. "Dreaming," Clara said, smiling. "And you?" "I got a letter from my mom." Nathan paused. "How do you feel?" "I don't know yet," Clara admitted, but I didn't cry. I just sat with it." There was silence on the other end, then a gentle, "That sounds like growth." "I guess it is." Nathan's voice softened. "I miss you." Clara closed her eyes. "I miss you too." The next morning, when she opened her email, she found a message from Elise, the gallery owner. It was short, formal, and electric with promise. "Clara, I've spoken to the director of the Savannah Arts Collective. They're interested in hosting a small feature of your work. 2 pieces, maybe 3, part of a regional emerging artist exhibit. I'll handle the logistics. Let me know if you're ready." Clara read the message 3 times before she let herself believe it. She stood in the kitchen, heart pounding, and whispered, "Yes." When Nathan returned later that evening, she met him at the front door, excitement and nerves clashing in her eyes. "I got invited to show my work in Savannah," she said, barely able to contain it. Nathan blinked, then broke into a grin. "That's incredible." "It's just 2 or 3 pieces." "It's your beginning," he said, "and you earned it." In the days that followed, Clara worked like she was breathing for the first time. She selected her best sketches, one of Scout, one of Richard and Marianne on the porch, and one of Nathan standing by the fireplace, unaware he was being drawn. She framed them with care, wrote an artist's statement, and even allowed herself to dream of attending the exhibit in person. The night before her trip, Clara sat with Nathan in the greenhouse. They drank tea by candlelight, surrounded by the soft scent of blooming citrus and the quiet comfort of their shared solitude. "Are you scared?" Nathan asked. Clara thought for a moment. "Not of the art. I'm scared of what it means to move forward, to let go of the version of me who never expected anything." Nathan reached across the table and took her hand. "You're not leaving that part of you behind. You're just giving her permission to hope." She looked down at their joined hands. "Will you come with me? To Savannah?" He smiled. "Try stopping me." Savannah was a dream wrapped in soft humidity and the warm scent of magnolia trees. The exhibit was held in a restored warehouse turned gallery space, its walls painted white and its floors polished to a mirror sheen. Clara stood by her framed drawings, nervous at first, then slowly steadied by the hum of voices, the appreciative comments, the moments of genuine connection with strangers moved by her work. A man stopped in front of the sketch of Nathan and studied it for a long time. "This piece," he said to her, "feels like love." Clara's throat tightened. "It is." After the event, she and Nathan walked through the city streets hand in hand, Scout trailing beside them on her leash. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. Back in Boston, life resumed its rhythm, but something fundamental had shifted. Clara wasn't just part of Nathan's world. She had created her own place within it. She began teaching art part-time at a community center, helping kids who reminded her of herself, quiet, lost, searching. Nathan cut back on work, spending more time at home, often helping Clara brainstorm lesson plans or planning weekend getaways. One evening, as summer slipped into early fall, Nathan stood in the kitchen with a sheet of paper in his hand. "You've been here 6 months," he said. Clara looked up from the table where she was grading a stack of beginner sketches. "I know," she said. "It feels like a lifetime." He hesitated, then stepped closer. I think it's time you took a break. Clara blinked. A break? A real vacation. Not because you're tired, but because you've earned it. 2 weeks. Anywhere you want to go. We'll go together. She smiled, touched by the gesture. And when we come back? Nathan knelt beside her chair, pulled out a small velvet box, and opened it. Then maybe we stop pretending forever. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, with a stone that caught the light like morning dew. Clara covered her mouth with one hand, eyes wide. Nathan, I don't want you in the guest house, he said. I want you in every room of this house, in every part of my life. Will you marry me? Tears welled in her eyes as she nodded, unable to find the words. Scout barked once, as if in approval, and the three of them laughed into the quiet joy of the evening. In the end, it wasn't the performance that changed everything. It was what grew beneath it. The quiet truths, the sketches, the shared silences, the willingness to stay. And for Clara, it was never about being rescued. It was about being seen and finally being chosen. Looking back, Clara's story isn't just one of survival, it is one of profound transformation. From a girl sleeping in borrowed corners, running from the suffocating silence of neglect and betrayal, to a woman whose quiet strength would become the beating heart of a new family. Hers is a journey that reaches far beyond luck or coincidence. It is about what happens when someone finally stops running long enough to be seen. And more importantly, what happens when that person dares to believe they're worthy of staying. She arrived at that rundown gas station with nothing but a battered backpack, a loyal stray named Scout, and the kind of invisible wounds that never make it into polite conversation. She didn't beg, she didn't dramatize. She simply stood her ground, even when the world had done little but push her down. And Nathan Hale, self-contained, meticulously ordered Nathan, saw her. Not the mess, not the history, just her. That single decision to stop, to offer a ride, became the unexpected spark that lit the fuse of a story neither of them could have imagined. In Boston, Clara didn't just find warmth and shelter. She found space to breathe, to clean, yes, but also to sketch, to remember, and slowly to dream. And in that space, Nathan gave her more than a home. He gave her safety without suffocation, kindness without control. He gave her time, not to change, but to return to the version of herself she had been forced to bury. Their relationship wasn't instantaneous. It wasn't defined by a dramatic declaration or a single passionate moment. It was something quieter, something truer. It was forged over late-night cups of tea and early morning walks with Scout, over the shared weight of unsaid fears and the lightness of unguarded laughter. Their love grew like a pencil line on paper, light at first, then stronger, clearer, more confident. But it wasn't just about love. It was about choice. Nathan didn't choose Clara because she needed him. He chose her because she made him see the world differently. She reminded him that perfection was a myth and vulnerability a strength. She challenged the narrative he had built around himself, about success, structure, and solitude. And Clara, she didn't fall into his arms because she wanted saving. She walked beside him because, for the first time, someone saw her value without asking her to prove it first. Even Marianne and Richard, people who had every reason to doubt the sudden presence of a stranger in their son's life, couldn't deny the grace Clara brought with her. It wasn't just her warmth or her respect. It was the way she looked at Nathan like he was more than just a provider, more than a businessman, like he was a man worth loving for who he was underneath the ambition and expectations. The turning point, perhaps, wasn't the faux engagement or the quiet confession on the porch. It was Clara's courage to open her sketchbook, to share the most intimate parts of her soul through graphite and paper. Each drawing was a piece of her memory, her truth, her love. And in doing so, she offered Nathan a version of himself he'd never seen, but instantly recognized. Her growth wasn't linear. There were moments of doubt, of fear, of pulling away, but she kept showing up. She faced her mother's apathy. She dared to hope for a new path through art. She found joy in giving, in teaching, in trusting. And in the end, she didn't just join Nathan's life. She rewrote both of their futures. So, what do we learn from Clara's journey? Perhaps it is this, that healing is not loud. It's not always about dramatic transformation or grand moments of clarity. Sometimes healing is found in the ordinary: warm bread in a quiet kitchen, laughter over shared stories, the soft brush of a hand against yours. Sometimes it's found in letting go of who you thought you had to be in order to survive and embracing who you're still becoming. Clara's story reminds us that no matter how broken you feel, your worth is not measured by your past. It is not defined by the things you ran from or the mistakes you made. It is defined by your willingness to rise again, to trust again, to choose again. And Nathan's story, it reminds us that loving someone doesn't always look like sweeping them off their feet. Sometimes it looks like sitting quietly beside them while they find the strength to stand on their own. It's knowing when to step forward and when to simply hold space. Now, here's something to reflect on. Imagine you're in Nathan's shoes, meeting someone at their lowest point, unfiltered, uncertain, but full of quiet strength. Would you, like him, take the chance to welcome them into your world, unsure where it might lead? If you believe that trusting your instinct to help someone in need is worth the risk, even when the future is uncertain, then your answer is A. But if you think the safer route, protecting your space and peace, is the better path, even if it means walking away from a potential connection, then your answer is B. Comment your answer below, A or B. There's no wrong answer, only your truth. And I'd love to hear your perspective. As always, if this story moved you, if it made you think about love, second chances, or the quiet ways we build trust, please consider subscribing to this channel. Your support is what keeps these stories alive. It's what allows us to keep creating meaningful content that resonates with hearts like yours. Now, I want to hear from you. What did you take away from Clara and Nathan's journey? Did it remind you of something from your own life? Do you believe that love can truly grow from the most unlikely beginnings? Share your thoughts in the comments so others can reflect alongside you. Let's turn this story into a conversation, one that continues long after the video ends. And if you're still with us, thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We can't wait to share the next story with you. Until then, keep believing in second chances and keep showing up for the people who matter.